Eliot, we can thank you for a lot of major works that exist in our repertoire today. And I'm wondering, in working on the music of memory with Nicholas Maw, was there anything in particular that stood out with regards to working with composers?
Yeah, he was a wonderful, wonderful colleague to work with. I met Nick because I had played in Washington, D.C., a work by the New York-based composer Bruce Adolphe for soprano, French horn, and guitar called Ladino songs, based on Sephardic songs from Spain. And Nick was friendly with Bruce, and so Nick came to that concert, and Bruce said, well, you know, if you're looking for another composer to write, Nick Maw is a good bet. So I was immediately impressed with Nicholas. He was such an elegant, just a wonderful gentleman. He was extremely, extremely refined, cultured. And this you can see in every aspect of what he left us, including, I mean, you've seen his hand. You know what a beautifully clear, elegant hand he had in writing music. You know, back then we still got handwritten music from composers. Now they, you know, send you something in an attachment and you print it out. You don't even know what the composer's handwriting looks like anymore. all the composers have the same handwriting now, unfortunately, so to speak, because it just comes out of a computer, and there are 3 or 4 programs that are used, mostly actually one that's used, and so all the music looks the same. But back then we had the additional advantage of looking at a composer's hand, which is in all great composers, extremely expressive of the music in some way that would be difficult to define, but definitely very expressive of the music. And that was certainly the case with Nick. So, you know, I discussed with him, you know, the idea of writing a solo piece for me, and he said, oh, he'd love to do that. And I think that to some extent, perhaps that first concert where he heard me performing, mostly with the soprano Lucy Shelton, but also we were joined by the French horn player David Jolly in the piece by Adolphe. But mostly it was music either with Lucy, or the one big solo piece that I did play in that program was the Brittain Nocturne after John Dowland, which is the obvious companion piece to the music of memory. And both of them are based on a theme of an earlier composer. But unlike the Brittain, which uses the Dowland theme as an apotheosis at the end of the work, and it has a certain symbolic meaning there, Nick brings Mendelssohn's theme in much earlier, and there are 2 or 3 flashbacks of it as the work goes on, perhaps consonant with the title that Nick chose, which is a wonderful sort of play on words, music of memory. And really the Mendelssohn theme does dominate the piece, but Nick gets very far afield indeed. And his structure is much looser than Brittain's, much more free-flowing, much more almost, I would say, almost stream of consciousness. Compared with Brittain's setting of the Dowland tune, which is almost syllable for syllable. Almost in the Brittain work, you can almost go syllable for syllable and say what word is being troped upon in Brittain's solo guitar writing, whereas in the Maw it's much more mysterious. It's much more convoluted in a way and further afield from the Mendelssohn. But I do remember meeting up with Nick at a certain point, and I remember him whistling in a very pure high whistle the tune that he decided to use, which of course is taken from the string quartet in A minor. And it just so happened that I knew that tune because there was a very famous recording that the Guarneri Quartet had put out of the entire quartet, and I had that recording. So I knew the tune before Nick whistled it to me. But I do remember him whistling it, and I remember the tempo he whistled it at. And the tempo he whistled it at is closer to the string quartet tempo, and pretty close to the tempo that he marked in the music quarter at 56. And I noticed that some of the younger players who started to play the piece take this theme at a very kind of slow and ponderous pace, and I'm not quite sure why they do that, because it's not supposed to be. Mendelssohn has nothing ponderous ever in his writing. He's always sort of elfin in a way. The Midsummer Night's Dream was the perfect piece for Mendelssohn to have been inspired by and to have written so much beautiful music too.
Well, Mendelssohn himself referred to a string quartet by Beethoven, and it's remarkable that one of the semitones, the E-F semitone, is also present in the Nocturnal by Brittain. You think that the choice of of Maw to choose this particular quartet is the actual bridge he's trying to build to the past?
Well, I think, yeah, I think that Maw is not of the sort of more far out, modern-looking English school. I mean, he is he's the obvious heir to Brittain's tradition. People like Bert Whistle, have gone, of course, somewhat younger than Maw, I think, but have gone, a very different direction. Or even Maxwell Davies would not be stylistically at all in the line of Nick Maw. But Nick Maw comes very clearly and directly from Brittain, and he's sort of like a next generation Brittain, the way you could say Rodrigo maybe comes out of Falla. And speaking of Falla and the interval E-F, of course, the famous Homenaje that Falla wrote when Debussy passed away. And it is a seminal piece in the guitar repertoire. Yes. Brittain described it as 20 minutes of music, jammed into 2 minutes, and that's a pretty good description. And of course, that piece does start with that, fa mi fa mi fa mi fa.
It seems to make more sense within the Spanish tradition, of course, of the
Phrygian mode and all that, and then the 4 descending chords in the Phrygian tetrachord, la sol fa mi, going down to this Fe semitone is such a critical part of guitar heritage and guitar sound. It's the quintessential interval in the Phrygian mode, and whether in transposition or whatever, that interval, that half-step interval, is part of all Spanish music. I mean, Rodrigo is using it in the Aranjuez, of course, yes. Although it's in the key of B minor, or in the cadenza, the Phrygian on G sharp. Which is just a transposition again of that E-F.
Talking about the guitar, I'm assuming that you made quite a lot of edits to the original score. Would you say that Maw had a good understanding of writing for the guitar?
I think he had a good basic understanding, and I always encouraged people like him not to sit around with a fingerboard chart, but really to write by ear. And then we could make little adjustments as things went along. In the case of Nick, the first version of this piece, which I got very short time before the premiere, which was in Leeds in 1989, very short time. It was a massive score that I got. I mean, I had got bits of it before, but by the time I didn't really get the full score until about 3 weeks before the premiere, and that was cutting it really short.
I would say so.
And particularly in the piece in that form, where there were a lot more notes. Particularly the fugue was unbelievably dense and really, really unplayable. So I managed to get through the first performance, but after that, Nick and I got together. And he said, "Okay, well let's work some more on the piece." He said, "I've just been having an opera done." He said, "One of the things you learn about opera is you learn to what he called scrub it. In other words, to get rid of anything non-essential."
Would have been Sophie's choice?
Probably, yeah. So he was he had just got done, completing his opera, and he came to work with me, and he said, "Well, we don't need those notes. Let's get rid of them." So we got rid of a lot of notes that had just impeded the flow and were not really essential to what he was trying to say.
So you'd say he was very willing to collaborate and give up ideas even. And
perhaps not ideas, but he was very willing to reshaping the pitches in order to convey the idea. In other words, I don't think he gave up on the idea. The idea was but you raise a very good point there, but he was not really giving up on the idea. He was just accepting a different way of communicating.
Would that mean even changing pitches?
Oh yeah, rewriting, significant rewriting.
Significant rewriting.
Not just, I guess, I mean, really it was more scrubbing away pitches, but there were several sections that were where he cut a little bit, especially at the very end of the piece when all the flashbacks come. He cut some of those back a little bit. The original version had a little bit longer flashbacks, and once I get into my house in Granada, I'm hopeful I can find this score, this very original score that I used for the first performance, and we can see we'll see in very graphic form.
That'd be very interesting.
It will look like a traffic jam with a big car crash in the middle of it.
Wow, so Maw speaks of memory-related techniques in this the program notes for the piece. How do you perceive that quote? What are memory-related techniques with regards to the music of memory?
I think the way that he takes individual motives out of the theme and sort of plays with them, develops them, sequences them.
And when looking at the piece in depth, it seems that there's a lot of three-tone motifs that very often are shaped as the Muss es sein or Ist es wahr theme that was in Beethoven's music.
Muss es sein. I think I think there's a good case for that. I mean, Beethoven, of course, used variation form frequently throughout the piano sonatas and even in string quartet, and Beethoven was also, I would say, almost obsessed with the Es ist vollbracht theme from the St. John Passion, which he used in 3 different pieces. So when we speak of memory, I think Nick was thinking of all kinds of different memories. I mean, the obvious memory we have is as we age and we think back over our lives, we have the memory of our own existence. But in terms of art, we have the memory of other styles, and we have perhaps the nostalgia for other styles, and perhaps a nostalgia for a time when we imagined the world was simpler and easier to live in, and we imagine the past sort of with rosy glasses as having been preferable to the present. So the nostalgia could be many forms of nostalgia. I think that any post-World War I English artist is inherently changed by the disaster of World War I. World War I was for England a cataclysm that is analogous to World War II for Russia, let's say.
But before we jump into the war,
I want to talk about this because I think it relates to the question about memory and the issue of thinking back, because the original Innocence is a pre-World War I Innocence. I mean, although Vaughan Williams also has his funeral piece for the World War I losses, but the pre-World War I England is a very different place from post-World War I England, and I think the innocence that was lost, this expressed perhaps most passionately and most powerfully by Brittain in the War Requiem, with its texts from Wilfred Owen, the doomed war poet, the great English war poet who wrote so searingly about the war. I think that this is inescapable in the English culture, whether people are doing it consciously or not. I think that this kind of nostalgia and this kind of grieving, this kind of obsessive grieving, which you haven't, right? Is in the Mendelssohn, it's got an airiness and a grace to it. It's almost a dance. It's almost like courtly dance.
But when it marked as intermezzo, which gives it by itself a further light.
Exactly. Which Mendelssohn loved. That kind of a thing. I mean, Mendelssohn, even when he's in a minor mode, he retains a kind of airiness and buoyancy. It's a Midsummer Night's Dream kind of a melancholy, but a sweet melancholy. But the Maw is going is striving way deeper than that. And I remember Nick saying to me, he said, I should like to write for the guitar an important piece. He said, I wish to write an important piece, a work of substance, which is a very wonderful aspiration for a composer for guitar, because we have so many charming little ditties in the guitar. They go on forever, and the instrument is made to do charming little encore pieces and ditties. It's just made to do that with all the coloristic variety that we have. But the Maw's work is really like the Berio Sequenza and the Bizet Concerto or whatever. There are certain works that are really aspiring to take the guitar in a wholly different place. And that's a very ambitious goal. And it's also something that the instrument resists in a way. The instrument would love to be just this beautiful, seductive, Zerlina kind of figure. And here you are trying to turn the Zerlina into Donna Anna or something.
You mentioned once that Bach would be our Mount Everest to climb.
Yes.
This piece seems to have that same depth and
this is a really significant work, and it requires a tremendous it requires a sort of an unseen virtuosity, although it is obviously difficult. But the kind of virtuosity it requires has nothing to do with what the Germans call Fingerfertigkeit.
It seems a very mentally challenging piece.
And mentally challenging, it's emotionally challenging, and physically it's challenging, and it's kind of a heaven-storming piece. It's a heroic piece. And when it subsides into that final A minor chord, you've really been through, the crucifixion and you haven't got to the resurrection yet.
I could totally see that.
So it's
a remarkable feat of the piece, because Maw himself said to Paul Griffith that he really found his feet when he simply tried to put down what he was hearing.
Yeah.
And the piece seems to reflect a lot of instinctive composing.
Yes.
And talking about a monumental piece, it speaks for Maw to be able to write in such a way.
I think the other thing about it is if you try to analyze the form, which is really important to do, to have an idea. You use the interjections of the theme as kind of the pillars in the piece. Even still, you don't. In the case of Brittain, the form is absolutely pellucid. It's totally lucid. It's totally clear. It's 1 3 3 3 1. The theme in Brittain's language. 3 variations, the Passacaglia, another 3 variations, and the theme in Dowland's language, and it's utterly symmetrical. 1 3 3 3 1. And the Maw is much more convoluted. It resists that. It won't be boxed into that.
Although it has 3 large sections.
Yes, but they're not symmetrical. They don't really line up in the same way. It's much more. Sort of expansive. It's not as tightly disciplined as the Brittain.
But clearly there is a unity in the sound of the language of the piece.
Absolutely.
So myself, I've been wondering about what those elements are. What is the aesthetics of Maw's language? And that's a very hard thing to look into. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I wouldn't say that. You could argue, I guess, that the tonal center is A in many cases, but I think that really there are a lot of movable tonal centers. But I certainly am hearing it as tonality. And I remember talking with Nick, and I remember him using, tonal expressions of tonality for describing the chords. He was describing something as a 9th or an 11th or a 13th or whatever. So he was not at all somebody that was thinking pitch classes. Like that.
Pitch classes do not give the answer to this piece, but you can clearly see with reference to scale figures and chromatic elements versus chords even.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So again, the bridge that he throws back to the tradition. Is there anything else in the piece you think that shows that bridge? Like using everything from Beethoven and Bach and not dismissing Schoenberg?
Well, I think I guess I react to the piece more on a visceral, emotional level. I don't think this is a piece that he really. I realize obviously it was planned out because when the theme fragments come, it's very important, and how he's always surprised. You're always surprised at how he gets back to the theme, and it's so graceful how he comes in and out of the theme. Those are some of the high points for me of the piece, how he manages to do that, and finally after that wild sort of Django Reinhardt,
the chords.
The chords, those wild chords, and with the pits section, this kind of, jazz, sort of a wild phantasmagoric jazz section that goes into those rasgueado chords, and then finally at the top, this fortissimo explosion of the theme coming back. That's something which obviously, the architecture of the piece was very clear in his mind. But I know that in the variations he let. As he said in the interview you cited, that I know that he let his mind just sort of go freely, and these are things that are utterly resistant to analysis. I remember working with Berio, kind of a similar thing. I think that, obviously there was a lot of planning that went into the sequenza, but the actual order of the thing and why it ended where it ended is never going to be explainable through an intellectual analysis, because I think that Berio really, wrote a lot from the gut also.
Berio as well, that's interesting. Is there anything you'd like to share with performers of this piece with regards to approach or technical challenges? Well,
I think there are certain parts of the piece that obviously require more work than other parts, and it's one of those pieces that it resembles running a marathon with Heartbreak Hill coming very towards the end.
I remember
very
clearly.
Towards mile 24, 25 of the marathon comes Heartbreak Hill in this case with the massive fugue, and the for lack of a better word, the Django Reinhardt jazz bass and jazz guitar duet. Which leads to the rasgueado chord. So that's the obviously really difficult part that has to be practiced the most. So I think practicing it in sections, and trying to be very clear with the phrasing, so it doesn't sound like a bunch of random notes thrown together, but that one is always phrasing is very important.
Well, I thank you very much for your insights.
Okay, thank you.
Hope we'll be doing this again anytime soon.
We'll get back to some nitty-gritty details with the guitar in hand at a later date.
Thank you, Eliot.
Thank you.